In August 1st, 945, Japan 2 atomic bombs were destroyed, had devastated Hiroshima, and entire cities disappeared in seconds. And millions understood that the war was lost. But even after that, there was something that remained intact for the Japanese people, their emperor for millions of people. Hirohito was not simply a ruler, was a figure, sacred, a descendant of the gods. And yet, weeks after the surrender, that man would have to walk to a meeting that would change Japan's history forever. A meeting with US General Douglas MacArthur. Japan had not only lost the war, had lost his empire, his army, his cities, and its national pride. The entry of the Soviet Union into the war, next to the pumps, atomic bombs launched by the United States, left the Japanese government no real options. The 15th of August, 1945, Emperor Hirohito radio message to the nation. Many hearts heard their voice for the first time in their lives, and what they heard was unthinkable. Japan gave up. But to understand what would happen next, first you have to understand who was really a hero. In 1945, the emperor was 44 years old and was reserved, thin, and extremely formal since childhood. Had been educated under a strict discipline, imperial wedding of silence, and reverences for millions of Hirohito hearts. Was not simply a head of state according to imperial tradition. The emperor's family descended directly from Amaterasu, the of the sun. Questioning the emperor, it was almost unthinkable. Many Japanese ever had seen him up close, and before the surrender, much of the country, I had never even heard his voice. For that reason, the announcement of defeat was much more than a political message. For many it was the collapse of an entire world. But most shockingly, the emperor was yet to be painted, was to meet in person with Douglas MacArthur, the man in charge to occupy Japan. After the war, before the encounter, Japanese officials warned the Americans on the imperial protocol were to be inclined to, had to show absolute respect, had to treat the emperor with a reverence that was almost religious. After all, for centuries, no one saw the emperor as a simple human being, but MacArthur had other plans. Japanese officials were terrified by that meeting, feared that any lack of respect for the emperor provoked a national humiliation impossible to control. For centuries, the imperial protocol had been treated almost as a sacred ceremony. Distance the inclinations, and even the way you look at the emperor, followed strict rules by the Americans, were warned, carefully had to show maximum formality, had to lean, should avoid any considered gesture, offensive. But Douglas MacArthur understood the power perfectly of the symbols, and I knew that meeting would not only define the end of the war, would define who would control the new Japan. The 27th of September, 1945. Hirohito arrived at the US Embassy in Tokyo. Ambassador formal suit hat and white gloves was playing intenso. MacArthur instead appeared without ceremonial uniform, without special medals, without imperial formalities, even with their hands on their shoulders. At times, for many, that was a shock. It seemed that the most powerful man in Japan was being reduced to an ordinary citizen against the American winner. And then something happened. Unexpected contrast between the two men. It was impossible to ignore. Hirohito looked small, sacred and ceremonial. Each movement was carefully controlled. MacArthur, on the other hand, was highly dominant and completely relaxed, seemed to move with the absolute security of the winner. Some stories even describe the US general acting with a informality that would have been unthinkable. Inside the Japanese imperial court, the scene looked like represent two opposing worlds, one ancient, one ceremonial and defeated the other modern military man. And victorious according to different historical memories, Hirohito took responsibility for the war upon himself. One of the phrases attributed to the emperor was, "I have come before you to offer me to the trial of the powers that you represent, and also I alone. I take responsibility for all decisions, political and military, taken during the war." MacArthur was surprised. "I hoped to find pride, evasion, or diplomatic coldness, but found serenity and total disposition to sacrifice himself to protect his people in Japan." Many believed that the emperor would even be arrested, executed, but MacArthur understood something crucial. If they destroyed the figure of the emperor in the form of humiliating, Japan could fall into absolute chaos. There were millions of soldiers still loyal, millions of people who continued to watch Hirohito as a divine figure to punish him publicly could provoke massive diplomatics and armed resistance. So MacArthur made a historic decision to save the emperor's decision. It was not only politics as well, was strategic even. After the surrender, there were Japanese officers who wanted to continue fighting. Some sectors of the army considered surrender a disgrace, unbearable in fact. Days before the official announcement, there were attempts to prevent the emperor's message was transmitted to the country. Shortly thereafter, a photograph of the meeting was published. The image traveled all over Japan. To one side appeared Hirohito, little rigidal and perfectly dressed, to the other MacArthur, relaxed, dominant, and almost challenging. Photography caused a psychological earthquake in Japan. For the first time, millions saw their emperor not as a god, but as a man defeated. Many historians believe that the publication of that photograph was not accidental. The image conveyed an extremely clear message. The ancient imperial order had finished. Now Japan was under occupation. American for some Japanese. That photograph turned out to be humiliating for others, was simply paradise of total defeat. But almost all of them understood something that day. The emperor no longer seemed untouchable, and perhaps for the first time in generations, began to look human. Months later, Hirohito would do something that would have been unthinkable before the war. Publicly declared that he was not a deity. Was the symbolic end of Imperial Japan. The country would then begin a radical transformation. He knew Constitution, US occupation, demilitarization, and the birth of modern Japan all had changed, and much of that change began at that silent meeting of 1945. The encounter between Hirohito and MacArthur. It wasn't just a political meeting, it was the shock between two worlds, between a defeated empire and a new one. Dominant power, but it was also the time in which the god of Japan finally descended to earth. And since then, Japan was never the same again.